Indeed, if statuary or art can still be found, it is often grotesque or blasphemous, such as a feminist depiction of the Last Supper, a monstrance made from a wine bottle, or a modernist representation of the Blessed Mother that is more likely to inspire diabolical thoughts than sacred ones. Crucifixes have become abstract images, or have been replaced by a risen Christ. And even the bare Protestant-like crosses have in many cases been replaced by plus signs. The list of traditional church fixtures that have fallen victim to modernism is as long as it is sad. Kneelers and altar rails are no longer built in new churches and have been removed from many old ones. Side altars have all but vanished, and stained glass windows which once depicted church history and the lives of the saints have been displaced by useless mosaics signifying nothing. So much for the spirit of Vatican II. Once Catholic churches were solemn places of worship, where silence and dignity were maintained out of reverence for the actual presence of Christ. Today, they're more often social gathering places, filled with irreverent noise and hubbub that befits a movie theater or sports arena. And in many cases, reverent contemplation or prayer has been replaced by interpretive dancing. Just as modesty in dress fell victim to the excesses of the 60s, today women's head coverings and men's conservative clothing have given way to attire that is better suited for backyard barbecues, if even there. Moreover, these external signs of disrespect are not limited to the laity. In the post-conciliar church, the clergy seem to want to dress like laymen in public and act as entertainers during Mass. And not only are the ideas of heaven, hell, and purgatory being debated anew, even the concept of limbo is reinterpreted in the sanctuary. And in many parishes, the role of the priest has become less one of spiritual leader and more one of social worker, or that of an activist, who seems more concerned with so-called political correctness than saving immortal souls. Nuns, as well, have all but abandoned their traditional habits. John Benari, editor of Catholic Family News, viewed these changes from a front-row seat in Catholic schools.
When I was in first grade, all we saw of Sister Joan Labouré was her hands and her face. And by the time I got to 8th grade, I knew that Sister Kevin Leonard had red hair and varicose veins.
Even some princes of the church have adopted vestments intended as political or social statements rather than designations of their holy positions, while others sport pagan-inspired costumes in the name of diversity and enculturation. Pope Paul VI set the precedent for change when in 1964 he surrendered his papal ring and crucifix to the Buddhist U Thant, then Secretary General of the United Nations. And while addressing that one world body, the Pope said, "The peoples of the earth turn to the United Nations as the last hope of concord and peace." A curious statement for the Vicar of Christ. The new papal crucifix, subsequently adopted by Paul VI and carried by succeeding popes, features a distorted, bent cross and a gangly, spread-legged Christ, an image attributed to Satanists of the 5th century. And the papal tiara, its 3 tiers representing the Holy Trinity, has been abandoned. Paul VI never wore it again after his investiture, choosing a bishop's mitre instead, and proclaimed in 1975 that no future pontiff was required to wear the crown. Thus his successor, John Paul I, chose not to be crowned pope and declined a traditional coronation. He opted instead for a ceremony that he helped compose, and was the first pope never to wear the crown, which had always symbolized leadership of the Universal Catholic Church. John Paul II followed his lead. But ecclesiastical dress, or lack of it, is not the only thing in the new church that shocks the senses. For centuries, solemn, hauntingly beautiful Gregorian chants were considered the official music of the church. And as time went on, some of the most magnificent music ever composed by the great masters was written for use during the celebration of the Mass. And the influence of such music has gone far beyond its religious origins. Dr. David Allen White, professor of English at the U.S. Naval Academy and a classical music scholar, had this to say.
Well, that Mass gave us Western music. The oldest Western music we have written down is Gregorian chant, and if you take a music history course, you're going to begin with chant and go through church music, and it won't be secularized till much later. But when it is, you're still going to have Mozart writing masses and Haydn writing masses, and you're going to even have someone who was just crotchety and cranky and probably had a good reason to be because of his deafness, Beethoven, who wrestled with God his whole life, still writing the great Missa Solemnis and seeing a priest on his deathbed. I mean, that is the tradition of music.
These classical masterpieces remain examples of some of man's most noble and uplifting creations, a cultural as well as a religious legacy. And what is the legacy of post-Vatican II music? But there are changes in the modern church beyond new sights and sounds. Changes that are less conspicuous, but far more important. Undoubtedly influenced by the presence of the large contingent of non-Catholic observers at the Council, reforms mandated by Vatican II's Constitution of the Liturgy led ultimately to sweeping revisions in the rites of the seven sacraments. During the reign of Pope Paul VI alone, they all underwent major change. A prime illustration is the sacrament of baptism. The new rite, seen here during a Novus Ordo Mass and performed by a deacon while the priest looks on, bears a striking similarity to Luther's revised order of baptism dating from 1526. The traditional Catholic rite incorporates such things as exorcism by breathing on the candidate, saying the required prayers, the giving of salt, and anointings before and after baptism. All elements that were eliminated by Luther and that have been eliminated in the modern church, so that now it seems the baptismal ceremony is little more than an initiation into the Christian community, rather than redemption from original sin. The rite of the sacrament of penance has also undergone extraordinary change. In 1977, a new rite of reconciliation was decreed for the Universal Church, and the term confession slipped into the dusty realm of historical oddity. But confession is one of the things that sets Catholics apart from Protestants and other religions and sects. It is a solemn obligation in which penitents confess their sins, declare sincere contrition, vow to amend their lives, ask forgiveness, and receive absolution from their priest. In many Novus Ordo churches, confessionals have been removed or have become reconciliation rooms in which priest and penitent have a discussion. This too echoes Martin Luther's view that penance was simply a recognition of past errors, a return to peace of mind, without true contrition for having offended God. And traditional one priest, one penitent confessions have in many cases given way to rites of general absolution, which are often performed illegally, in direct violation of canon law or contrary to the Holy Father's wishes, while for the most part the few traditional confessionals that remain stand empty. As for the rite of the sacrament of confirmation, a quote from Pope Paul VI effectively summarizes the Vatican II changes. He said, in part, that only the initial blessing over all the confirmands has been retained. This was in spite of the fact that most theologians maintain that essential matter, the required actions for the sacrament, consists of the imposition of hands and the anointing with holy chrism. Moreover, the old form, or words of confirmation, as specified by the Dogmatic Council of Trent, signifies that the bishop has imposed the sacrament. I sign you